Before we get started today, I want to take a minute to acknowledge my privilege. I'm a cis-white female, and those factors, as well as many others, have influenced my opportunities in life. I'm a firm believer that diversifying the profession of occupational therapy will improve our ability to provide more effective and culturally appropriate care for our clients and enrich the profession as a whole. That's why I was so excited to have this conversation today. It's also important to note that the opinions discussed on this episode are those of our guests and not those of the organizations they work for. Welcome to the Moxie OT podcast, where we invite occupational therapy practitioners, consumers, and friends of OT to talk about evidence-based practice. Today we're moving away from practice, but we're still exploring the evidence. We'll be discussing holistic admissions processes and occupational therapy programs. We have two guests, Dr. Bridget Hahn, Academic Coordinator and Chair of the Admissions Committee at Rush University, and Dr. Arielle Ramirez, an occupational therapist at Chicago Public Schools. Arielle has recently completed a research project titled Exploring Inclusion Within Occupational Therapy Education. Let's meet Bridget and Arielle. Today we're talking about holistic admissions. We'll get into what that means in just a minute. Our guests today are Dr. Bridget Hahn, Academic Coordinator and Chair of the Admissions Committee at Rush University, and she's an alum of our podcast as well, and Dr. Arielle Ramirez. Arielle is a recent graduate and occupational therapist with Chicago Public Schools. Her capstone was a research project entitled Exploring Inclusion Within Occupational Therapy Education. This is very exciting for me because Arielle was a student of mine and she's doing great things. Welcome both of you to the Moxie OT podcast. Arielle, can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to focus on inclusion within OT for your capstone?
Sure. I just wanted to say thanks so much, Dr. Zara, for inviting us to talk about this really important topic that I'm really passionate about. So I want to say thanks. I chose to focus on inclusion for my capstone project because I'm someone who's very passionate about increasing the representation of underrepresented groups in OT education as well as in our profession. I think that having that doctoral capstone project really provided such a unique opportunity for me to really look at, why is there a lack of representation within our profession and within OT education. And as someone who self-identifies as a member of several underrepresented groups, I think that it's super important to really focus on these issues, especially today, in today's day and age with the problems that we've been experiencing as a country. So I just really wanted to advocate for increased representation within OT education and really hope that our profession can continue to grow and become more represented.
Thank you, Arielle. I think I would like to thank you for completing your capstone project and helping us take one more step forward as a profession towards increased diversity. Bridget, can you tell us a little bit about your role at Rush?
Yes, certainly. And thank you, Sarah, for having us on. And it's wonderful to get to connect and have some more collaboration with Dr. Ramirez, who had the good fortune to briefly connect with last year as part of her research. But I'm hoping that, this relationship can continue to grow thanks to this connection. So thank you. And the question just was in regards to my role at Rush. And I have been at Rush University since 2018. I am currently an assistant professor and the academic coordinator. So in my role as academic coordinator, a big component of that is overseeing the admissions committee. So I'm the chair of our admissions and our scholarship committee. And I'm also somewhat of a student advocate role, like informally. So I have worked closely with student faculty liaisons, and I help with creating the schedule and coordinating our advising. So I do a number of other odds and ends and administrative activities, but in general, it's thought that the academic coordinator role is kind of the advocate for the students within the department as well.
Nice. Thank you so much. Knowing what I know about you, I'm sure you're a fabulous advocate for the students. So I'm sure they're glad to have you. Can you tell us more about what holistic admissions means, is?
Yeah, so holistic admissions is really a broad term. It's not necessarily a very concrete answer, but it's really holistic, just means like we're looking at the whole file. So it really minimizes that triage type of admissions review process where we're highly considering some of the quantitative measures like GRE and GPA, and specifically, not using those as measures to quote unquote like weed out the applicant pool, and really taking a closer look at other more non-traditional metrics, including like the personal statement or a person's background, whether that be their volunteer or work experience and research experience. So letters of recommendation, those types of things into consideration. And the way that any university really goes about that could look, countless different ways. And oftentimes you may see this advertised in different ways, like they'll specifically say it on their admissions website that they're considering some of these other factors, and sometimes you may just not know the exact processes.
That's reminding me of another project that Arielle and I worked on, where we created a video to help students identify what are some of their other strengths that they might be able to highlight in their application process. Arielle, can you tell us why this holistic admissions process is important rather than a traditional admissions process?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Dr. Hahn actually hit the nail on the head when it talks about looking at these individuals and these candidates beyond this quantitative data, really looking at beyond their GPA and GRE score. You're able to look at their lived experiences, what are their different perspectives, kind of see what are their other accomplishments, because I think solely looking at the quantitative data, or how well individuals test, that really doesn't dictate whether or not you're going to be an effective occupational therapist. I think that being an occupational therapist, there's so much more to being an effective practice leader other than academic knowledge. You have to have the ability to really, build relationships with others, and have these other lived experiences to really connect with your clients and problem solve, etc. And several studies have even suggested by implementing these holistic admissions processes that programs really do experience a slight increase in students from underrepresented groups admittance. So not only is implementing holistic admissions, it can help facilitate or have increase. Oh, can we retake that one part? So by implementing holistic admissions, it may help facilitate enhanced inclusion, as well as representation in OT programs.
I think that's so exciting to hear that studies are finding that. And, we all, many of us recognize how much stronger the profession is as we increase its diversity. But also, like, when you think about all the soft skills that an occupational therapist needs, that's not reflected in a GRE and probably not a GPA. And looking at all these other accomplishments people have done in their lives, you can really find some excellent professionals. So I think it's a really exciting process. Bridget, can you tell us about some of the changes you've observed within your program since you've implemented these processes?
Yeah, Elsie, since I started on as chair of the admissions committee in 2018, really the program had been doing a nice job at looking quite holistically over as long as they could remember, taking a big picture look at a lot of our applicants, with the exception that we had always historically had a minimum criteria on the GRE for the written and for the quantitative and verbal portions of the GRE. And this was done, historically, OT school has been very, very competitive, and we were getting like upwards of 500 some applicants. And this was really being used essentially to narrow down our applicant pool. And this year was actually the first year that we decided to make that a recommendation of the minimum score. And what we found was this is just, we haven't even matriculated this class, and we're still filling the cohort, but it's really exciting to think that we went from, in our last cohort, 3 individuals that started that identified as underrepresented minorities, and we currently have 9 individuals that are identified as underrepresented minorities in the incoming cohort. And it really appears that that cutoff was, I was surprised because we had always made it clear in our information sessions on our website that we didn't historically admit anyone with a score under a 302, but we still had over last year 160 applicants apply that did not meet the criteria. And I think by being able to really look closer at all of our applicant pool, we saw we're interviewing a much, much larger number of underrepresented minorities, and it's promising. I'm like waiting to see what happens because it was only one cohort. So I don't know if this is like a fluke that all of a sudden like, wow, look at this. This is so exciting because, historically for the past couple of years, it would be like 1 or 2 individuals that it seemed like we were interviewing. So it is really promising and kind of surprising, just like that one little change, how big of an impact that it had. And, I think we were doing a really nice job of looking holistically, but still having that GRE cutoff was really doing us and our applicants a disservice, it appears.
Yeah, that's really exciting how, just one small change can really make a difference in your admissions process. And I think that's helpful to hear for other programs that are trying to take their first steps towards changing their process. And I feel like it feels very daunting. But as with any project, one step at a time, and evaluating and seeing how things are going can make a big difference. So that's really exciting to hear. I'm glad it's been a success so far at Rush. So there are multiple barriers to the admissions process that disproportionately and underrepresent populations, like having those skills to do well on a test, or having money to do multiple prep programs or take the test again. Arielle, can you tell us more about some of the barriers that you found in your study?
Sure. In our study, there were several identified barriers experienced during the admissions process to OT school. The first one being that the lack of awareness of OT limited exploration of OT as a potential career. Students from different cultural backgrounds or immigrant families described how OT wasn't even an established profession, and or there was a lack of language to really describe what OT was as a profession. And so oftentimes students, families, and their friends would encourage them to look into other well-known professions such as nursing or in law. The other huge barrier was something that you kind of touched upon, was the OT admissions process is very burdensome and very expensive. 63% of our student survey respondents kind of reported that they had a limited knowledge and guidance on how to even apply to OT school. Many students describe the OT application process as very unorganized, with various OT programs having different admissions requirements, and limited opportunities to even shadow occupational therapists. And some students even reported that, it was difficult to find information about the admissions process even online. So not only is the application process very burdensome, there were other challenges such as the financial barriers as well. So about 52% of our student surveys and 60% of our faculty survey respondents reported that a lack of financial resources to be a barrier to their application process. Some students reported that they even chose not to attend an interview session because of the cost of traveling. Other students reported that they had to decline offers from programs due to the financial burden of attending that program. And so there are these different barriers that students from underrepresented groups continue to experience. Um, Other smaller barriers that they also experienced was that they had a lack or limited social support. They had limited academic resources, and I think about like 22% of them also reported that they had inadequate preparation for high collegiate demands and examinations. So those are some of the different barriers that they experienced. And then I think one of the biggest barrier to their admissions process was the fact that there was a lack of representation, not only in OT education, but also in our profession. Some students really described that they questioned OT and thought that it wasn't a good career fit because they didn't see themselves or they didn't see OT practitioners who represented similar identities to their own. So although our profession is, growing in diversity and growing in inclusion, students from underrepresented groups are still experiencing different barriers in their admissions process to OT school.
That's so much. Thank you so much for your great work on your capstone. And I think that's really important things for us to think about as clinicians. And, do we have an inclusive atmosphere where a student who wanted to shadow would even feel comfortable asking to shadow? So many of those factors that maybe there's something we can do about them right now as we work on diversifying. And so that kind of brings me to my next question, which is, in the studies that I've done on this topic, I've been to some webinars and things like that. An important factor is that if you're going to invite a more diverse cohort into your program, you need to make sure that you have an inclusive and supportive atmosphere before they arrive, which speaks to a lot of the barriers that you identified, Arielle, once students get into the program. Can you think of any strategies that might be helpful to retain students in underrepresented groups?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just going back to the representation, having increased representation within the faculty, that's a huge support. Other things that we had identified in our research study was that there should be more increased cultural awareness in classroom activities, case studies, and using gender neutral pronouns and using terms like holiday party versus Christmas party. So just having that increased cultural awareness and representation, not only in our lectures and slides and things like that, but also in the OT curriculum. Um, Another support was having more open discussions about microaggressions, privileges, and addressing problems when they do arise. Oftentimes students from underrepresented groups have difficulty stating that they have a problem or that they may feel alone or less included. And so really providing students those supports and opportunities to provide programs feedback, so that they can address these different problems and really support these individuals from underrepresented groups.
Yeah, I know that you've really stressed that for us at Midwestern, and I think you can give us more information on this, but I think you had an example of a faculty member who kind of had like a daily or weekly survey, like what went really well, what wasn't so great, to open up those opportunities for students.
Yeah, and I think it also limits that barrier, that power dynamic of having a teacher, you know, going up to a teacher and saying like, hey, I have a problem, it gets rid of that power dynamic, and it allows for individuals to feel like they can trust their faculty because they can open up to them in that specific way.
And I think that if you're a faculty member who creates that opportunity for students, then students are going to realize it's a faculty member open to feedback. So maybe they'll provide it anonymously, but maybe they'll be willing to follow up, in person and kind of further develop that relationship. I hope. Bridget, I know Rush has been doing a lot of great things. Do you want to share with us some of the strategies you've implemented to increase your inclusivity?
Yeah, definitely. Since I started on at Rush, I was really impressed how they really had diversity in their mission as an organization as a whole. And I was proud to work at an organization that seemed to kind of put their money where their mouth was, and really excited at how we could also just continue to grow our program, because it was something that as I came on board, that the faculty had kind of acknowledged that we have growth area within the department. But I think overall, what was really nice was that the culture at Rush felt very supportive. So there are different strategies that I've been exposed to throughout the department itself, the university as a whole, that I've been able to see and refer students to. Then also things that I'm seeing like across professional organizations that I can go ahead and share. So the department itself, beyond the admissions, the GRE change, one thing that what Dr. Ramirez was talking about with the shadowing kind of triggered my memory that we also did shift to requiring just an online shadowing opportunity if applicants weren't able to complete the shadowing, because it is really hard for a lot of students to get access to OTs to get that familiarity. So giving them other options and like getting involved in something, learning something new. So taking a course to learn something new and writing a reflection paper on that and how that intersects with their understanding of occupational therapy, so that we can get our admissions criteria of that familiarity with occupational therapy without necessarily them needing to go shadow. Part of the impetus for that change was certainly COVID, but it'll be interesting to see what the committee wants to do moving forward with the positive feedback that we've had. We're also looking to get a video up on our website that actually, after talking with Emily, Dr. Simpson over at Midwestern, she was talking about how they had gone through that, and I'm sure that was at your recommendation, Arielle. So I'm trying to pull some of those strategies now, working on that at the admissions level. And as far as the department goes, even in orientation, this year we tried this like life report activity where everybody just puts together a 2-minute video that goes through like their life, and the faculty do it too. And this was a technique that was shared to me through Dr. Verschellen's work on bandwidth recovery, helping students reclaim cognitive resources lost to poverty, racism, and social marginalism. So that was something, it was interesting doing that this first year and doing it online, but I'm hopeful that that's something that can also work on building that sense of inclusivity, and that we've all had these different life experiences that are valuable beyond our GPA or GRE. We've all had things that are more rich to us, including the faculty. And the faculty were, I think, a little bit hesitant. It felt very vulnerable as a faculty member to be telling this group of brand new students more about themselves, but it seemed to go over pretty well. So that's one thing during orientation. We also are fortunate to have implicit bias training that occurs here at Rush that we're able to offer to our students that taps into some of this microaggression that Arielle had mentioned. And we have a whole sociocultural class that's been something that the curriculum committee, as we transition to our doctoral degree, really valued. And I think the students do find that they really appreciate that, and they enjoy that class, and it gives them a broader understanding of the importance of the social cultural elements. I think another big thing is just really listening to the students, which is a challenge for us faculty. We have these student faculty liaisons, as Ed mentioned, to like help us provide feedback. And I really appreciate the discussion earlier on the anonymous survey, because this has been a very hot topic at within our department. And it seems like we finally found a nice solution that was putting up a link on our classroom learning management system for all of the faculty about, just open to like what's been working well, what are, I think there were talks, we haven't finalized it yet, but even using like a green light, yellow light, red light system, and having it not necessarily be like just about microaggressions or about some of these maybe implicit things that faculty were doing that didn't realize. So having a space for that is something that we're hoping to implement in the future. And again, the anonymous survey thing was very, I think as a faculty member, it feels very vulnerable. Again, we get our idea scores, we get all this feedback from students. So it's like a little bit daunting, but I think if we really want to address students' concerns, we need to know what we're doing. And I think there was talk about, having those intermediate people like the dean's office or the chair. And I think this is a really nice, safe way so the students feel like they can go directly to the source without getting the faculty member like in trouble. And the faculty member also doesn't have to feel like all this is going to their boss. So I think that was a really great suggestion compromise that we kind of came to.
Yeah, I really like the way you've found a consistent way throughout the program to provide that feedback, because we're kind of like catch as catch can, and that each faculty member has decided on a different way to do it. And that's feedback that I get from the students all the time, is like every Canvas page is different, so it's hard to kind of get in a system or know where things are. So I think that consistency is really cool.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that that'll provide a nice opportunity for students. And our students themselves have been really great at this, especially since over the course of the past year, all of the racial injustice that's been spotlighted, they've really taken action. So they connected with faculty and started this Rush OTs in Action group that I am faculty advisor to, along with Dr. Olson, our chair, and Dr. Beachy, who are like really supportive of these efforts. And this group of students has done things from getting together like a book club or a podcast club and starting different discussions, to also they're like holding us accountable on this survey thing, as well. So we're meeting with them regularly and they're like, what's going on with that survey? So that's like another example of that, something that came out from that group. And they recently were sharing with the faculty just about these microaggressions that were occurring on fieldwork, and it was pretty appalling. Some of it was microaggression to like flat out racism. And I think we were able to, Dr. Beachy's expertise is more, she teaches the sociocultural aspects of care, and she was able to quickly whoop up before our students are going just in a few weeks on their fieldwork, some resources on how to address racism in fieldwork. So that was also brought about through this kind of student committee, and finding these ways to connect with students in a way that they are able to share these things, and also finding a way that we can follow up and take action on the things that they're telling us, which I would still say is definitely a work in progress. But those were a few examples of our successes that I'd like to share.
Yes, let's celebrate your successes. I mean, I think we all need to recognize this as a work in progress. Obviously, no one's ever going to be perfect, and we're all going to accidentally say the wrong thing. But the more we can take that feedback and accept it and try to do better next time, we're going to make the profession a better place. I was just thinking about the microaggressions or flat out racism that you were talking about on fieldwork. And I know I've been pretty surprised by things that I've heard. And also the importance of, Arielle, you were talking about how important representation is in education, because you might not feel comfortable reporting back to your school's fieldwork coordinator, if they don't look like you, and you might feel that they don't understand why this situation's making you so uncomfortable. So finding those other resources that we can tap into, like COTAD, which I'm not sure if I can ever remember what the acronym stands for, the Coalition for Occupational Therapy Advocates uh,
For diversity.
for Diversity. Thank you. It's usually
I wrote it down.
Yeah.
I wrote it down.
They have a mentorship program, which I think can be, and I think they also have a specific fieldwork program. So, it's important for us to know what some of the resources are. And I know we're going to get into more resources in a minute, and we'll have lots on our website. So, Arielle, are there any other findings from your study or from a recent student perspective that you'd like to share?
Really, I think I wanted to emphasize like the importance of having enhanced inclusion in OT education as well as our profession. I think that, you know, having increased representation, the list goes on and on in terms of benefits, from enhanced learning experiences in the classroom to enhanced client practitioner relationships, to increase advocacy and services for these underserved and underrepresented communities. There are just so many different benefits from having an increase in representation in our profession and within OT education. And I think that, just to kind of summarize everything that we've kind of talked about, was that one of the biggest supports on doing that and getting to maybe even to that point is implementing holistic admissions, and understanding that it could be a huge facilitator to enhancing inclusion in OT education, as well as our profession.
Thank you so much. That's so well said. I won't try to paraphrase it in any way. So as you both know, at the Moxie OT podcast, we always want to make sure we provide an opportunity for our listeners to increase their Moxie. So Bridget, if a faculty member or an occupational therapy practitioner wanted to know more about these strategies, are there any resources that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I think like as you were mentioning, the Coalition for Occupational Therapy Advocates for Diversity is a great resource for faculty and for OT practitioners, because they've been putting on a lot of these different Ignite events. They also have the mentorship program, as you had mentioned. For faculty, being involved in the academic education special interest section through AOTA has some great resources too. They're talking a lot about, they've had a session on holistic admissions, but a lot about inclusion through various different underrepresented groups in OT. I would also say getting involved with the professional organizations. I know that both of those that I mentioned are kind of through AOTA. I know our Illinois OT Association just recently started a subcommittee on community outreach, and they're really working on different marketing to make our marketing more representative. As Dr. Ramirez, and it keeps kind of coming up, is really problematic that people don't see OTs that look like them. So trying to make our marketing, develop marketing materials in that sense, and also starting a mentorship program within the Illinois OT Association for individuals interested in OT school. So I believe the COTAD mentorship is for actual like OT students or really OTs, and this was actually looking to help get people paired up to navigate that very daunting OT admissions process for applicants.
That's so great.
And they're also working on some more community engagement. So that gets to like reaching out to the different organizations, whether that's faith-based organizations, youth groups, community colleges, and looking particularly at spaces where there's a lot of underrepresented minorities, and getting OT involved in job fairs and things like that. So those are some things that ALOTA is working on. That's look for that. But just in general, getting involved with a professional organization. There's different Facebook groups for holistic admissions. I listen to the Admissions Leadership podcast, which will occasionally have information that's directly related to diversity and inclusion, and they have a lot of interesting content that's more broad than just OT. So it's kind of, OT is such a niche, it's kind of interesting to hear what else is happening in some of the undergraduate admissions and how that process looks. So those are just a few.
Those are a lot of really great resources. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure we have the links up on our website. Arielle, if a student's considering applying to OT school, what resources might you recommend for them?
Yeah, so just looking at the American Occupational Therapy Association page, if you go to their homepage, there's a tab that's education and careers. And if you scroll down, it has another tab that says considering an occupational therapy career. If you click on that link, there's so many different resources that are available there. But if you want a nice nitty gritty, um, quick resource too, they also have a FAQ page on what is occupational therapy, what are the different programs that are available there, and just kind of a really quick and nice resource for students who are just like interested in looking into OT as a potential career. And then they also have two contacts. So if you want, if that information is still isn't enough and if you had further questions, you can ask actually an occupational therapist or an occupational therapy assistant by contacting educate@aota.org. Or if you had more questions but you wanted a perspective from a student, you can also ask a student at this email, askastudent@aota.org. And then AOTA also has another great tab that has finding a school, and that allows you to look at the different programs across the US. So if you're looking for a bridge program, an occupational therapy aid program, or post-professional programs or re-entry programs, they have a list of all of those different programs and what are the specific like websites that you can go to look into them further. So yeah.
Those are great resources as well. I think that sometimes it gets very daunting when you just Google, like, what is occupational therapy? How do I go to OT school? So having some specific resources is really useful. Thank you. And I think you both brought up really important points of connecting to the national and state organizations. They're there to support us and to support future practitioners. So use those resources.
And they're free.
Their websites are free.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you both so much for joining me today. This was really exciting. I'm excited for the future of occupational therapy, and I really appreciate you both for the work that you're doing to support the profession.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this important conversation with Dr. Bridget Hahn and Dr. Arielle Ramirez on holistic admissions. There's a growing body of evidence for holistic admissions in OT. One very recent article that came out in the beginning of this year by Ford et al. Examined the perceived challenges to and facilitators of the recruitment and retention of occupational therapy practitioners and students of color. This qualitative study found several themes. 3 themes discussed barriers, including the lack of representation in and knowledge about occupational therapy, feeling like an outsider, the need for financial support, and 2 themes identified facilitators. They were the importance of individualized mentor-mentee relationships and connections with national organizations, specifically for people of color. The results of this study provide useful information to create strategies to address these barriers and improve the recruitment and retention of OT students of color. The Coalition of Occupational Therapy Advocates for Diversity, or COTAD, is a national organization whose mission is to empower occupational therapy leaders to engage in practices that increase diversity, equity, and inclusion for a more transformative occupational therapy profession. The National Black OT Caucus's purpose is to act as an advocate for Black occupational therapy practitioners and occupational therapy students in order to enhance and promote their contributions to the profession, national and state associations, and the public at large. We'll have links to all of these resources and more on the Moxie OT website. If you want to be a part of the conversation, leave us your email address at our website. We're on all of your favorite social media channels as well. Please like and subscribe so others can join the conversation. The Moxie OT podcast was recorded in our home in the Avondale neighborhood of Chicago. This episode was produced by Brian Zira. Our intro music is courtesy of 13 Taco Studio. Technical assistance was provided by our dog Grody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.